Welcome to the Week 3 Superflexology Start Sit series. I'm your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. Unfortunately, we're going to be a three-man wrecking crew this week. Jordan Lindsay will not be joining us, but he will be back next week. So for tonight, you're stuck with the Three Stooges here. I'm happy to introduce Mitch Sorensen. That's at DinoMC on Twitter. What's going on, Mitch?
Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm just ready for another fun week.
Hopefully this one works out a little bit better for you than last week. And then also introducing Dan, the man with a plan. I keep extending that, Lamagna, and that's at LC_Dean on Twitter. What's up, Dan?
Always a pleasure to join the Superflexology boys. Let's go, guys.
So we are here tonight we're trying to piece everything together. So week 1, our start-sit situations didn't pan out the way we'd hoped, but the DFS stuff, it was spot on. Last week, the start-sit advice, we hit the nail on the head. But as a team, the DFS information probably could have been a little bit better. So we're going to recap real quick. Last week, so week 2, out of the 6 different situations and the start-sit scenarios that listeners threw at us, Dan, you nailed 5 out of 6. Mitch, Jordan, and myself, we all got 4 correct. But as a team, the consensus, the majority, we got 5 out of 6 correct. So I was very happy with that. To the team, fantastic job. And I said we're going to have a season total, a running tally throughout the year. Mitch, you are now joined by Dan at the top of the leaderboard with 7. And then Jordan and myself, we are right below you at 5. But don't worry, I have a feeling I'm going to catch up this week.
I'm not going to miss any, so you're not catching up.
What was that, Mitch?
I just said you're not going to catch up to me because I'm not going to miss any.
All right, we'll see. Well, listeners, full disclosure, before we jumped on the air tonight, Mitch had said that he had his initial takes, and then after digging in a little bit further and looking at it a little bit more, did you say you switched every single one?
I switched all of them. Yep.
So it's going to be very interesting to see. But before we get to tonight's takes, again, I want to hit on last week's results. So as a team, we had Josh Jacobs over Duke Johnson, Baker Mayfield over Marcus Mariota. Dan, the 2-point question, you hit on Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson, and then Stafford finished a somewhat close third, and then the entire team faded Kirk Cousins. So I would say that's a win overall. The one question that we did not hit on, and it was Breida versus Josh Gordon versus Mixon. If we would have done it Sunday morning, we would have been all right because I had Joe Mixon in a ton of lineups. And Mitch, this happened in a co-owned league. I reached out to him. I said, are you okay with me pulling Joe Mixon out of the lineup? So again, if that question would have been proposed to me on Sunday morning of last week, I would have said Breida. But instead, I told the listeners that if Mixon plays, he's the guy I want. And, well, we know how that played out. Matt Breida with a fantastic game. Let's get into tonight's questions. And the first one, and Dan, we're going to start with you. 0.5 PPR, Kerryon Johnson at Philadelphia, or David Johnson versus Carolina?
I was going to say earlier, John, that, Mitch was talking so much smack last week. We had to elevate our game, and I was able to join him on top of the leaderboard now. So I'm going to hopefully continue this hot streak, go against Mitch's Kerryon Johnson here, because the Eagles' run D is not the problem. It's their secondary. So give me the home running back. Cam on the opposite side is questionable. The Cardinals' fast-paced offense. This listener's got me thinking about David Johnson also in GPPs. David Johnson, it would be my selection.
Mitch, I'm going to bounce it over to you. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so Kerryon and David Johnson are both averaging 16 touches a game. The big difference is Carolina and Arizona are the 2 fastest teams in pace of play so far this season. And I think that's even going to keep up with if Cam Newton doesn't play. So I'm going to take David Johnson too.
In Jordan's absence, I'm going to serve as a proxy vote for him. For this question, he also had David Johnson. And this is 3 weeks in a row with the first question. We kind of start off with an easy one, I guess, because it's going to be unanimous. I am also going with David Johnson. And Mitch, spot on. The pace of play, it's going to be a very fast-paced game. And Carolina, they've been gashed by the running game the first 2 weeks. 266 rushing yards against. That's the eighth most in the NFL. I think it's going to be a very positive game script for Arizona. Whether or not Cam Newton plays, he hasn't been impressive up to this point in the season. I know it's early, and there's still time to turn it around. But with the injury and the concern that Kyle Allen's going to be playing, I don't know if we can expect much from that offense. And while the Panthers have not given up much to running backs in the air, we saw a somewhat rusty Todd Gurley shake off the cobwebs in week 1, and he averaged almost 7 yards per carry on the ground against them. So with all that said, and then going back to the Philadelphia Eagles defense against Kerryon Johnson, Dan, you said it already. It's not the run defense that's the issue. It's the passing defense there. 2 games, they've given up a total of 85 rushing yards. And yes, people are going to get excited. CJ Anderson, he's not there, but I think Ty Johnson's going to step in. And it seems like time after time, we want to believe that Matt Patricia is going to do the right thing and let Kerryon Johnson be a bell cow. I just don't see it happening this week, especially against Philadelphia. They're going to be forced to throw the ball. Long-winded answer here, but it's a 4-0 sweep for David Johnson. Guys, do you have any other thoughts there?
Just disappointed Mitch didn't take his boy from Detroit, Kerryon Johnson, but okay.
I thought he was going to take Kerryon.
I did want to, because I do think he's going to get most of that red zone work, but I'm really worried that there's just not going to be a lot of red zone work there this week playing in Philadelphia. So just had to go with David Johnson. It's just the safer pick.
I think so too. I just think that Carolina defense, it's more susceptible to run. And I just think, especially with it being 0.5 PPR, even if Kerryon Johnson is used in the passing game, that's going to obviously be cut in half from full PPR. So just one of the other reasons that I also went with David Johnson. Going on to the next question here, and this is a very interesting one. It's 2 interesting choices that initially you would think these guys aren't going to be in my lineup. So Mitch, we're going to start with you. The ageless, the timeless Frank Gore versus Cincinnati, or a guy that I've bashed recently, Tony Pollard against Miami. What are your thoughts, Mitch?
So my thoughts on this are kind of boiled down to, is Singletary going to play or not? If Singletary plays, then I want Pollard. But if Singletary is out, then I want Gore, because I think he's going to get most of that work, because I think Buffalo's going to be quite ahead in that Cincinnati game. If Singletary does play, I think Pollard's going to get probably all the second half work against Miami. And I think that's a pretty good play right there too.
Okay, so the answer, we're not going to let you...
Answer is, I'm going to say Pollard, because I think Singletary is going to be out.
You think Singletary is going to play or be out?
Oh, sorry. I think Singletary is going to be in. So I want Pollard.
All right. So let's just say that you're going with Pollard if Singletary plays. And is it safe to say you might go with Gore if Singletary's out?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. I that's a definitive answer. I like that. And people, they can, keep track of the start sits and the actives and inactives as it leads up to the game. So I can dig that. Before we get to you, Dan, Jordan, again, his vote, Tony Pollard. What are your thoughts here, Dan? Who are you going with?
I think Mitch has a spy cam on and was looking at my notes. I was going to kind of joke and say I'm hedging my bets. I know, Bauer, you've had some good analysis in past weeks of, possible scenarios in a game. And, I agree. If Singletary sits, don't get cute. Go with Frank Gore. Go with the starter. He's going to get the workload. But, to try to just give something else for listeners to think about, as much as this is just like last week when New England played the Dolphins, I said, start all the Patriots. This week, I'm saying start all the Cowboys. You're analyzing your lineup and you need someone that has a little bit higher ceiling, then I would definitely be considering a Tony Pollard, because he has that upside versus Miami, especially if, he dips into Zeke's carries or they bench Zeke early. But for the purpose of the show, I'm going to go with Frank Gore.
I'm going to be riding Mitch's coattails here. And exactly the same thing. Tony Pollard, if Singletary plays. If Singletary's out, I want Frank Gore. I think it's going to be a very positive game script for the Buffalo Bills. That defense has been strong. Cincinnati, not exactly an offensive powerhouse. I think it's going to be a positive game script for the Bills. And in that Dallas-Miami game, what's that line? Is it over 20?
It was 22 the last time that I saw it.
Jeez, oh man, 22. That's a lot of points. So not even really talking about the line, but that's how Vegas, it's going to be a blowout. And if it's over by halftime, I'm looking at Zeke, and I think he gets a solid workload in the first half. Hell, he might even find the end zone 2 or 3 times. But in that second half, that's absolutely a situation where we could see Tony Pollard. So same thing as Mitch. Pollard if Singletary plays, Gore if Singletary is out. But Dan, I like what you said too about the upside. If you need points and you need a home run, and this is one of the spots that you can gain an edge on your matchup, I can see why you would go with Pollard for that upside. But I'm wavering here, of course. But yeah, okay, I'm going to stick with it. Pollard if Singletary plays, Gore if he does not. Final answer. I'm hitting the button. No more switching my answer here. Any other thoughts on this situation, guys, as I sit here and ramble for an hour?
I think we're all on the same page, John. The only thing I would add is, before our podcast tonight, thinking about this Dallas game, I'm like, what do we really know about Miami? And I hop on their website and I watch a Coach Flores podcast, and there was just no energy in his interview. And I'm thinking to myself, does this guy know he's going to be fired at the end of the year, when they go in a different direction with all those draft picks next season? Or does he know that, this team is just in trouble? So I think it's going to be a long day for Miami.
I wouldn't be shocked if this were a 30, 40-point blowout. I don't want to get Dan too excited here, but that Dallas team has looked solid, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to put up a lot of points. So, yeah, I think that's a good analysis of the situation. So Jordan had Tony Pollard. And then, Dan, what was your final answer? Was it Gore or Pollard regardless? Or same thing?
No, same as you guys. Frank Gore as long as Singletary sits.
All right, perfect. So that's definitely a situation to monitor. And I have Singletary in a lot of teams, so I'm definitely looking at that all the way up until game time. Moving forward, full PPR. Dan, we're going to start with you. Mark Ingram at Kansas City, or the human cyborg who shouldn't even be playing yet, Emmanuel Sanders versus Green Bay. What are your thoughts, Dan?
I think this listener of the Superflexology podcast has a nice problem to have here, is they're both very good players. What's tilting me here, even though I think the Denver Broncos are going to be coming from behind and they're going to need Manny Sanders, and he's probably going to have a decent game, there's still that improved Green Bay defense, so I don't think it's a blow-up spot. And I say you start your backs. That 54-point total in that Baltimore-Kansas City game is so enticing. And the always underappreciated Mark Ingram, I think that's the way to go.
All right, Mitch, what are your thoughts here?
I had the same thought. My biggest thing is I worry if Ingram is going to get the touchdown work, because if he doesn't get you a touchdown, I think Emmanuel Sanders is going to end up being the better play. And so I'm just going to go with Sanders this week. He's top 12 in targets already this season. He has a 22% target share. I think they're going to be behind and have to feed him a little bit more. And I really like his floor this week compared to Ingram, because Kansas City's been pretty good against rushing attacks so far. They held Jacobs out of the end zone. I know the Broncos had that really tough week 1 as well.
The Kansas City defense is interesting because they've given up the most yards per carry, but it's almost like a bend but don't break situation. Mitch, just like you said with the touchdown upside, that might not be there, but I think we can chalk him in for, pencil him in for 70, 80 yards. But if he doesn't find the end zone, and with that apparently explosive passing attack, Ingram could lose a little bit of work here in what should be a high scoring game. With that said, with 20 targets up to this point through 2 weeks, Emmanuel Sanders last week in my personal lineups, I had him as a sit everywhere. Against the Chicago Bears, I thought it was sound reasoning, but this man just keeps defying logic. So I'm going with Emmanuel Sanders. Look what he did against Chicago, and I think it's going to continue here against Green Bay. Joe Flacco, he can rely on Emmanuel Sanders. He's a trusty veteran to throw to. So unfortunately for this listener, we're getting the 2-2 split here. Jordan and Dan with Mark Ingram, Mitch and myself with Emmanuel Sanders. But again, Dan, you said it earlier, this listener, they're in a very good situation. And I don't know if they really can go wrong in this situation.
Yeah, they're both good plays. I'd be confident either way. I just differ a little bit, and I think that Kansas City-Baltimore game is going to be a shootout, and I think Mark Ingram's at the heart of the offense. So it's going to be a fun one to watch to see which side of this gets it right.
Well, I hope we're both right, and I hope they both put up a lot of points, because I have both of those guys in a lot of my season-long leagues or my dynasty league. So let's put up a lot of points both ways. Let's go to the quarterbacks, and this is an interesting one, and it kind of stemmed from a tweet that I had that I made in jest. It was like a breaking news tweet, and it said that I was going to be sitting Kirk Cousins on my Scott Fishbowl team. So a listener threw this out, and Mitch, we're going to start with you. It's a typical +4 for touchdowns, -2 for interceptions. You have to pick one of them to start. One of them is playing on Thursday night, so we will let the listeners know that while this is coming out after the game will be played, we will let the listener that posed this question know our answer so he can have, I would like to say, an edge going into it. But Mitch, Kirk Cousins against Oakland, Teddy Bridgewater at Seattle, Jacoby Brissett versus Atlanta, and the legend, apparently, Gardner Minshew versus Tennessee.
The guys that I don't like at all first is I don't like Bridgewater. I've never been a huge fan of his, and I'm not even sure he's going to start the whole game. That Jacksonville, Tennessee game, even though I love Minshew, that's just a game that I'm going to stay away from. And that Atlanta passing defense actually looked pretty good last week. And so I know everybody hates Cousins, and that's just the thing to do right now. But give me Cousins. The Raiders, they're very good against the run so far, and they're average at best against the pass. And Diggs had that touchdown called back last week that would have, raised Cousins up that much more, made that game a little bit closer. So give me Cousins. It's going to be a plus matchup, and I think he's going to put up a good 20, 25 points this week.
So for you, he's going to score more points this week than we saw the last 2 weeks combined. Yes. And I think you can sense my negativity in my voice there.
Yep. I figure no one else is going to pick him, but yeah, dude, give me Cousins.
Well, I will say that's 2 votes because Jordan also had Cousins. Dan, what's your thought here?
This was a fun one, guys. With Mitch, not stay away from Minshew. I think it's a horrible Thursday night game with an over-under projected of only 39. So that one's the easy dropout. The Bridgewater one, also agree. Coach Payton not naming a starter this week is interesting. And in my Scott Fishbowl league, it's kind of a fun one here where Nelson Souza, I'm competing against the Shark, and he spent $98 on Bridgewater in free agency, and I took Taysom Hill for $2. And I know Mitch and I talked about Taysom Hill a few weeks back, even before Breeze was injured, and thought if something happened, he could kind of sneak in there. So I know people were deterred with Breeze even when Taysom Hill took his snap. So who wants to play with Bridgewater? Takes me to Brissett versus Cousins. Bauer, I thought you picked this question today because I think you had a similar tweet out there today where you made a little bit of a statement.
I did.
I'll save that for you. I do think Brissett's a solid play at home, and I think you're going to see Cousins go downtown and see a little bit extra Thielen and Diggs. I know everyone's low on Cousins, but I think that's when you hop in and you take Kirk Cousins this week.
I'm going to go against the grain here because this did stem from a tweet that I threw out there. And I actually, on my Scott Fishbowl team, I'm starting Jacoby Brissett this week. Cousins, he's a guy that you like to think, okay, he has a solid floor, and that floor bottomed out in the last 2 weeks. And I think he's just hurt me too much. And, I have to say enough is enough. And this week, it's got to be Jacoby Brissett based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks. I know we're talking about the Diggs touchdown being called back last week, and, whoop-de-doo, that's going to be an extra 4 points plus whatever yardage. But yeah, for me, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. I can't trust Kirk Cousins right now. And we've brought up Scott Fishbowl, and Dan, I know you're not going to bring it up because you're a little more humble than I am. And if I were in your situation, the entire world would know about it. But why don't you tell the listeners about your start to the Scott Fishbowl season so far? And I think you're top 5 right now.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. And it was actually, I think with Mitch, you were the one that brought it to my attention and, top 5 ranked, went online and then saw that. And my team's just been hot. It's really, maybe all that studying us gentlemen did in all these dynasty leagues that led to a very good draft. Over the first 2 weeks, 5th in the nation in scoring with 544 points, and a combination of Dak and Mahomes and Mark Andrews have led to a great start. So I wish it was just a little more than week 2, so I don't want to celebrate too much.
Still quite an accomplishment. And again, I knew you were not going to bring it up because you're much more humble than I am, but that's something to be very proud of. So congratulations. I know it's only 2 weeks so far, and if my team continues down the path that it is, there will be no playoffs for the Bauer Club this year. And Mitch, I think you're kind of in the same situation as I am. 0-2 start.
0-2 start. I'm right in the middle. I'm like team 570 or something like that. So it's nothing to be happy with.
So Dan, if I can't win, because obviously I have to look out for myself first, and if it's not Mitch, Dan, we're both going to be cheering for you, man.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. We're, football brothers here. So if one of us comes out, we'll celebrate together.
Absolutely. Like I said, you can fly us both out. We can all join each other for a beer. But until then, let's get to our next question here. This is full PPR. And I thought this is a really interesting one because it's a guy that people see as reliable, and it is somebody that typically has a solid floor against, up until a few weeks ago, somebody that wasn't really being talked about. So, Mitch, let's start with you. Jarvis Landry against the Los Angeles Rams, or scary Terry McLaurin against that tough Chicago Bears defense?
I'm really worried about Aaron Donald. I think he's going to give Mayfield hell this week. And I know the Bears defense is very good as well, but maybe it's a little recency bias from watching that Browns game on Monday night, but I think that offense isn't very good. So give him McLaurin this week. He's the rookie. He's getting 8 targets a game, and I don't see any reason why that shouldn't continue this week.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
I think this is the week that I breeze past Mitch. I feel it here. I'm going to go the opposite way. I know Terry's hot and it's a Monday Night Football underdog, maybe coming from behind. So that could be enticing. But I'm going to go with Vegas here. The Browns are underdog, but their projected total is 23 versus 18 points. I think with Njoku injured today, I think Landry's the guy that Baker's going to be looking for to move the chains. And I think there's just more shootout potential in that game. So give me Jarvis Landry.
Now, for this one, unfortunately, Jordan did not give me an answer. I threw this one up late, so I don't think he saw it. So I'm the swing vote here, guys. And I'm going with Terry McLaurin. One concern that I have, and Mitch, I agree with you, Aaron Donald, that defensive line, they're going to cause some troubles. We even saw them struggle against the Jets defense. Another thing, the Rams defense, they've actually been pretty solid against slot receivers. And that does worry me when it comes to Jarvis Landry. They're going to be looking at Odell Beckham a lot. And it's just, I don't know if Jarvis Landry, that floor is not there that's always been there in the past. So for me, it's Terry McLaurin. We saw what Emmanuel Sanders did to that defense last week. McLaurin actually plays a similar rate out of the slot as Sanders. And I'm not saying that McLaurin's going to hit what Sanders did last week, but I think there's a chance that it could happen. McLaurin, he leads all receivers with double-digit receptions in terms of average depth of target, 16.3 yards, 20% target share. He hit a 90% snap rate 2 weeks in a row. And 2 weeks in, he has at least 17 fantasy points per week. So I'm taking Terry McLaurin. I think he offers more upside. And at this point, I'm even willing to say he has a higher floor than Jarvis Landry. So for me, Terry McLaurin. Dan, do you have any last comments there since you're the odd man out on this one? Any last rebuttal?
I guess my last rebuttal will be as Baker's get with that pressure that you mentioned from Aaron Donald. He's got to get the ball out of his hands quick. And Landry PPR 10+ receptions on Sunday night.
Is that a Dan Lamagna guarantee? 10+ receptions?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but enough points to pass McLaurin.
Okay, all right. So those are the start-sit situations for this week. Fantastic questions. And it was nice this week to get some different guys in there. The first 2 weeks we had Josh Gordon, we had Matt Breida. They popped up a few times. So it's nice to get some fresh blood in there. Now to our DFS takes. And again, let's do a week 2 recap, even though I wish we didn't have to, because this one overall, it wasn't too pretty. So our fades over $6,000. Kenny Golladay, he actually had a 4.3 times return last week. He had a fantastic game. So while we missed on that one, Mitch, I think you were happy from Lions' perspective. Saquon Barkley, 2.8. So falling below that 3 times threshold, we're going to say that's a win. Adam Thielen, Mitch, 1.8. Fantastic fade on your end. Devontae Adams coming right at 2.7. We'll call it 3 out of 4 on the fades, with Golladay being a massive whiff. And then players under $6,000 that we said you had to have in your lineup: Josh Jacobs, John Brown, Marlon Mack. None of them really did what we thought they were going to do. But luckily, there's always next week for us. And players under 4,000, Terry McLaurin, he did have a solid return of 4.5 times his price. Carlos Hyde, 2.5. Adrian Peterson, 3.3. And Chris Thompson, 2.6. So out of the value plays, we were 2 for 7, with McLaurin being the big hit, and then Adrian Peterson over 3 times. So not awful. But we will be improving this week, and we have some fantastic ones lined up. I think you can tell from the excitement in my voice. So, Mitch, let's start with you. A player over $6,000 on DraftKings that you are not putting in your lineup this week.
Okay, I want to make sure on this one. Everything that I've read, James Conner's going to play, right?
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah, so everything I've read, so I don't want to take the easy way out, but I'm definitely going to fade him. That San Francisco defense is legit, and the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line isn't. And it's San Francisco's first home game because they've been on the road, on the East Coast for the last 2. I think San Francisco is absolutely going to hammer Pittsburgh, so I don't want anything to do with James Conner this week.
Unfortunately, I agree with you there in terms of the 49ers hammering the Steelers. That defense has looked strong, and it seems like that offense is starting to click. For selfish reasons, I hope George Kittle gets a little more involved, and I might have to watch that one alone, because if George Kittle scores a few touchdowns, even against my Steelers, I will be cheering. Dan, what are your thoughts here? Over $6,000 that you are fading.
First, I think it'll be the 3rd week in a row, Bauer, that I'm going to bust you for this Pittsburgh Steeler negativity. I know they're 0-2, but don't you just get a feeling that just maybe Mason Rudolph could, pull some magic here. I just got this Steelers feeling, but I'll come back to that later. Hey, two locks. I'll just continue being a wise guy here. AJ Green, Melvin Gordon. Stay away in case you don't see that little O in DraftKings because they're out. But my pick, I'm going to think different here. Okay, a little like the legendary Steve Jobs of Apple. Think different. I'm going to fade away from Austin Eckler, who I'm listening to all these people on these in different shows today. Still saying to play him. $7,200. He had another goal line fumble last week. That's his second goal line fumble that we've seen this year. I'm just getting a little nervous. Justin Jackson, although it was called back on a penalty, had a nice 60-yard touchdown run, and he looked fast. They're sharing carries. I just got this little feeling that, you keep fumbling the ball, Justin Jackson's going to sneak in there a little bit. And not saying he's a bad play, but for DFS, I'm going to go in a different direction this week. So fade Austin Eckler.
And that's probably one that a lot of people aren't thinking about just because of how hot he's been. So that's definitely going to be interesting. And the fact, calling out his goal line fumbles, that's going to lose you goal line work in the future. So that's definitely something to look at. And for Jordan, looking at his list here, and I don't like this one. And again, it's for selfish reasons, but he has over $6,000. He's fading Chris Godwin at $6,900. For me, I have two guys, and it's going to be really short and sweet. Christian McCaffrey, $8,700. That Arizona defense, the last 2 weeks, they have made a commitment to stopping the run. And that's going to be no different, whether it's Cam Newton, Kyle Allen. You either have a brand new quarterback coming in, and they're going to make him beat them, or you have a quarterback that cannot beat a defense by throwing the ball. So for me, Christian McCaffrey, $8,700 going RB3 for that price. That's a little too much for me. I could see him falling below 20 fantasy points, and that's definitely not enough to return on that price tag. And then whether it's Taysom Hill or Teddy Bridgewater playing, and Mitch, you know that I've been fading this guy kind of even in season-long leagues prior to the whole Drew Brees situation. Michael Thomas at Seattle, $7,400. Too much for me. I'm staying away. All right, let's go to under $6,000. These are guys that we want in our lineups, and boys, we got to do better than last week. The 0 for 3 whiff on these guys that we told listeners, you got to play. So Dan, under $6,000, this is the guy that's going to be in your lineup this weekend.
This one, Bauer, I'm going to go back to your earlier statement. This is my lock here. This is guaranteed, foolproof. Guys disrespected him before with the Manny Sanders conversation. Mark Ingram at $5,700. He's tired of the disrespect. Okay, at 17.7 DraftKings points per week. Now going into a shootout versus the Chiefs with a 54-point total. Guys, I'm telling you, Mark Ingram all the way. Mark it down.
All right, so Dan says book it. All right, we're going to take that one to the bank. Hopefully that check does not bounce. Did you like that line? That was very good, impromptu.
Pretty good.
Touché.
That was impromptu. I didn't even have that one written down. Wow, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that one. But Mitch, under $6,000, who are you looking at?
I'm going to go with Fitzgerald. He's gotten 13 and 11 targets the last 2 weeks. And, they're coming back to home after week 1 when they tied with the Lions. And I think this is going to be a blow up spot for this offense. I don't think we're ever going to see Murray, Fitz, or Christian Kirk this low again. So at 5,100, give me Fitzgerald because you're going to get at least 12 or 13 targets out of it. And so you're definitely going to get your money back.
I love that one. And from a season long and especially dynasty perspective, kind of transitioning away from the DFS for a second, Fitzgerald is a guy that I've been trying to buy in multiple leagues that I don't want to say a win now team, but that I can compete this year. And I think he's going to give me either wide receiver depth or hell, he might even be able to be thrown into my wide receiver 2 mix. He's been a fantastic play so far this season. And I do think that we're going to continue to see that. The write-in vote here from Jordan, he has Mecole Hardman, and it looks like $5,000, but that's a guy that he's playing in his lineups this weekend. And for me,
it's 5,000.
Is it 5,000?
Yep.
I couldn't read his chicken scratch. So, Mitch, you picked Larry Fitzgerald. Dan, you picked Mark Ingram. I'm going to keep it up with the theme of the older guys here and go back to Emmanuel Sanders, $4,800 at Green Bay. I think 20 fantasy points is more than realistic for a 4-time return on his price tag. And then I do want to throw in one more guy, and it's somebody that's been coming, I've been coming around on. And $4,400, same game, same team. I like Royce Freeman as well. That backfield, he's been getting a lot more work than I think a lot of people anticipated, and that's going to continue. He's been looking good with that offensive line improving and starting to mesh. Royce Freeman, $4,400. I'm not going to give the John Bauer guarantee. I'm not going to throw a JBG out, but it's somebody that I like a lot. Do you guys have any other thoughts on these $6,000 plays?
One person I wanted to bring up was Marlon Mack as well. So he's averaging 23 touches a game. And we know that Atlanta defense, they have the smaller linebackers, the smaller safeties. And going against that Colts O-line, I'm really okay with Mack. I think he's 58 or 5,900 this week, and I'll probably have him in my cash lineup as well.
I think he was floating right around that same price because Jordan brought him up last week, and he's somebody that I had in a lot of lineups, and he broke my heart last week, but hopefully we can see that rebound. So now again, let's dig a little bit deeper. Under $4,000, but again, guys, don't cheat. No tight ends. Who's somebody you want, Mitch?
All right, so this is kind of cheating. But if McCoy and Damian Williams are out, and it looks like they will be at this point, Darwin Thompson is minimum priced at $3K. Even if McCoy is out, I still want Darwin Thompson because I think he's going to get most of the rushes. If McCoy plays, then I probably won't play Darwin at all. If those guys are out, I think you have to have Darwin Thompson in every single lineup because he's just going to be a free square.
And Mitch, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to warn you, if Damian Williams misses this game and Darwin Thompson goes off, just stay off of Twitter.
Oh, yeah, I'm just going to delete it. Just act like it never even happened.
Just completely delete your account. Dan, before we get to you, looking at Jordan's pick here at $3,900, Miles Sanders. $3,900. So, Dan, who are you looking at here? Hopefully nobody took your pick yet.
They did not. Yeah, although I do like Mitch's advice there, just as something for the listeners to, keep aware of. Darwin Thompson's on everyone's radar. So if any of those backs are out, Mitch, shared good advice for everyone to keep an eye on.
I thought you were going to say that good advice was just to delete your Twitter.
I was staying kind. Good one. But I think this is a critical pick that we're offering this week. As you look at the roster construction, you're going to have to hit on a lower price guy or two, depending on what you're jamming into your lineup, whether you're paying it up at quarterback or if you're jamming in the running back. So I think this is going to be a critical pick. For me, you have certain sleepers and you're just waiting for that breakout week. I'm going back to the well. I swear I'm the Steelers fan here, but James Washington, and now we could even do that Mason Rudolph storyline that you said was lacking a week ago versus a Niners secondary that's ranked 18th in a must-win game on the road. Give me James Washington. This will be the week he breaks out at a low $3,500.
And I will say I would not be surprised at all. And on this week's episode of Superflexology, I did kind of wave the white flag. And I'm not saying that James Washington is the guy, but I think it's been pretty clear so far based on the way he's played that Dante Moncrief is not. So I kind of conceded there. But I wouldn't be surprised if James Washington popped off. And for that price, how much did you say he was?
35.
What does he need? One long 60-yard catch with a touchdown? And he returns his value there. So I like that play, actually. So if you're looking for a boom guy, James Washington, I think he could be that guy this week. Two guys I have three guys, but two, I just want to bring them up. So I'm walking a fine line here. They're not the guys that I'm saying to play, but as we mentioned before against Miami, Tony Pollard and then Devin Smith. So Pollard's 3,800. Devin Smith is 3,400. Both of them, they, again, just like we mentioned with James Washington, they could pop off for one or two big gains and they could find the end zone. And if they do that, they're going to be a really solid return on their price. But the guy that I want, it doesn't look like Deshaun Jackson's going to play. And I don't know the report on Alshon Jeffrey yet. Have you guys heard anything yet on Alshon?
He's out for at least 2 games.
Okay, so it opens things up for Nelson Aguilar. And I know he dropped a critical catch in last week's game, towards the end of the game that could have potentially won it for them against Atlanta. But $3,600 against the Detroit defense that, it wasn't exactly fantastic, especially week 1 against Arizona. And we saw Larry Fitz pop off a pretty solid game. So 3,600, Nelson Aguilar, that's a guy I want. So Aguilar, Darwin Thompson, James Washington, Miles Sanders. And again, the Darwin Thompson pick, it comes a little bit of a caveat. That's more if, I would say, Mitch, if McCoy doesn't play, because even if Damian plays, Darwin still will probably have a role.
Yeah, I think so. This pretty much comes down to if McCoy's out, you could throw Darwin in every lineup at that point. And if they're both out, you better have Darwin in every lineup.
Absolutely. And then one thing, and I'm going to mention this at the start of the next episode, but I want to bring it up before I throw it over to you guys for your final thoughts heading into week 3. but we are going to do some giveaways as the season progresses and at the conclusion of the season. So we really appreciate all the listeners that throw questions at us, the people that send us tweets, send messages in group chats. We really do appreciate it, because without you guys, this show, it doesn't exist. We're not doing start sits without start sit questions. So we're going to be doing giveaways that include signed jerseys. And then we talked to the guys over at Full Time Fantasy, and we're going to be giving away a few spots in the $35 FFWC leagues next season. So just something that we're going to be able to give back to the listeners as a thank you for tuning in and dealing with our nonsense and shenanigans, but again, giving us the material to be able to put these shows out. So again, thank you guys so much. Mitch, final thought, heading into week 3, what do you want our listeners to know?
All right, so this can be about DFS. If Cam Newton sits, Kyle Allen is only 4,000. And don't know if he's good, if he's going to be terrible or not, but at 4,000 for a quarterback, he's going to give you your money back. You're just going to have to be able to figure out if that savings is going to let you get up to someone who can make up the difference between, say, like Kyler Murray for 2,000 more. If that skill position guy that you're going to get is going to make up the difference going down to Kyle Allen.
I like that. And I agree with you. If it makes sense to get that savings, if you can bulk up elsewhere. I've put together some lineups before, and it's like, all right, running back, I'm going to get a value here, wide receiver here, flex here. And I'm like, okay, I have $3,000 left. So then you got to start looking to where to spend that money, because you have all these great value picks. So if it makes sense, I like that one a lot. Dan, before we sign off here, first 2 weeks from the books, what do you want our listeners to know heading into week 3?
I'm going to stay consistent with my theme, as I think Miami is just terrible. And play all the Cowboys. Play all the Cowboys. You can't go wrong. I'm expecting to cash in on that this week. And I guess the last thing was, similar to Mitch and just DFS advice. We're giving a lot of feedback today. It's a lot of great picks, but it's still only Wednesday. Keep an eye on the transactions, see who's injured. And then come Friday, Saturday, it's trying to determine who the chalk is in GPP. So sometimes we have a good pick, but when everybody's on it and those tournament contests, I kind of get away, and come, Sunday morning at 10 a.m., we're looking at some other options. So keep studying all the way to game day, and, follow us all on Twitter. You'll get some more tips along the way.
Yeah, Dan, that's fantastic feedback. And, again, full disclosure to our listeners, as always, we record Wednesday nights. And that's the one thing that I really like, getting these episodes out early. So I typically get them out either late Thursday, early Friday morning. But it's before a lot of the other content comes out, which is coming out Friday and Saturday leading into the Sunday matchups. And I always feel good about some of the picks that we have whenever a lot of people start coming on board. And that first week, I know for me personally, I was high on Mark Ingram and Chris Carson. And then I went on Twitter on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. Every single person was talking about them. I don't want to say they were listening to the Super Flexology Start Sit series and they willingly and knowingly took my takes.
I'll say it.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but no, in all seriousness, so it's always good to see other people agreeing with you. But Dan, like you said, once it really gets out there, pay attention to those guys that are going to be very chalky. So if you are involved in the GPP and the bigger tournaments, maybe those are guys to stay away from, just because every single person's going to have them. Mitch, Dan, again, as always, thank you guys for joining me and dealing with me on a weekly basis, especially with my technical difficulties leading up to tonight's show. Listeners, all the folks that threw questions at us, we really appreciate it. As always, thank you for joining us for the Super Flexology Start Sit series. Best of luck in week 3. Have a great night.